Hi everyone, welcome to Design and Dine Online. My name's Gemma and normally I would be hosting fun interactive art workshops to the public in both the UAE and Ireland, but as both countries are still in lockdown, instead we are providing some free, easy to follow online art tutorials to make sure people can still stay creative at home. This is our second online video tutorial and I hope that everyone enjoyed the mandala design one from last week. This week is going to be quite different though, as we are doing portrait drawing. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. I can't draw. I can't even draw a stick man, let alone a face. There's no chance I can draw people. This one's not for me. But you're wrong. This one is for you. This is portrait drawing for complete beginners. So it does not matter if you've never drawn before or you haven't lifted a pencil since school. Everyone can follow along. This video will teach complete beginners how to draw facial features realistically and how to draw them proportionately correct on a face. It's easy to follow and really fun, so do give it a go. And if you do try it out, make sure to tag us at Design and Dine or send me a message, as I would love to see your portraits. I'm using an A4 page today as that's what most people will have at home, and I'm going to begin by drawing a line that's 18 centimeters long in the middle of my page. I'm going to mark halfway up that at 9 centimeters, and at that halfway point I'm going to draw a line that is 12 centimeters wide, and that should be centered, so you've got 6 centimeters on your left and 6 on your right. So we're going to draw an oval around this cross to form our face. Don't make the mistake of just connecting one line to another diagonally. It needs to be a nice rounded shape. So I'm making the top of the head nice and round, and I'm not leaning too heavy with my pencil. You'll see I'm doing multiple lines because I'm just working out the shape as I go along, and then I'll go back and erase any lines that I don't need after. I'm sketching the bottom half of the face a little bit more narrow so it comes in a little bit more towards the chin. You can think of this shape I'm trying to form as like an upside down egg. Obviously we'll go back and alter that, and everybody has a different type of face shape, but this is just a general one for the purpose of this practice. To begin the eyes, I'm going to mark 1 centimeter out on the left and the right from that line that's going down the middle of the face, and each eye is going to be 3 centimeters in width, so mark that out as well. I know what you're probably thinking, those eyes are way too low, it looks like an alien, massive forehead, but I promise it will make sense. To form the eye, I'm going to draw a little point in the inner corners to form the tear duct, and the overall shape of the eye is going to be very similar to an almond shape. Obviously everyone has completely different eye shapes, but this is just a very general one for learning how to do this for the first time. So now I'm going to draw in the tear duct properly, and I'm going to create a very thin, faint line, very close to the bottom line of my eye to create the lower eyelid. Make sure your pencil is really sharp to do this and don't lean too heavy. I'm going to draw a faint guideline right through the centre of each eye to help me keep my iris and pupil nice and central. For this face we're going to have a very neutral expression with the eyes just facing forward, and when you go to draw the iris of the eye, just remember that we don't actually see the full circle of the iris unless the eyes are wide open and a person is really surprised. Normally our upper lids will actually cover the top of the iris. Your pupil should be right in the centre of the iris. Part of the iris is covered by the upper eyelid, so if you need to draw in the full circle of the iris just to get your pupils nice and central, you can do that and then go back in and erase the top of them after. Before we shade in the pupil and the iris, we're going to add a little light reflection to the eye. I do this by drawing a little diagonal rectangle that crosses between the pupil and the iris. I'm going to shade in the pupil around that little rectangle that we've just created, and this is probably the only time I'll tell you to lean heavy with your pencil because we want the pupil to be really nice and dark. I'm now going to add some definition to the outside of the iris and just make that outline of the iris a little darker. I'll go over the upper eyelid and just darken that down a little bit. I'm now going to shade the iris by using loads of light, thin little lines that go from the outside of the iris in towards the pupil. Make sure that your pencil is really sharp and don't lean too heavy. You want to keep these nice and light and subtle. And be sure not to cover the little white rectangle for the light reflection. Now using very light, small circular motions to add a tiny bit of shading around the outer edges of the iris, just over those little lines that you've created, but be sure not to shade in close to the pupil. When I'm doing this, I am not leaning down on my pencil. My pencil is just very lightly skimming the page to add the tiniest bit of shade in this area. I'm now going to draw in the crease in the upper eyelid. This stays quite close to the upper eye and comes in even a little bit closer towards the outer corners. Before I move on, I'm going to cut off a tiny bit of my eraser and I'm going to go back in and lift off some of the pencil shading in the iris just to create some highlights. Then I'll go back in and redefine the pupil if I've accidentally erased any of that. The next step will make a big difference in making your eyes look realistic. I am adding the tiniest bit of shading to the upper part of the eyeball and the inner and outer corners, and when I mean light, I mean really light. You want your pencil to literally just skim the page with very small light circular motions, and then you're going to use a Q-tip to blend that shading out. A Q-tip allows you to be more precise with your blending. If you use your finger, it can get a little bit messy, or like oils or dirt from your hand can transfer onto the page, which you do not want. Next we're going to do the lashes, and I've decided we're going to draw a girl today, so the lashes are going to be a little bit more defined. We're going to start from the outer corner and work towards the middle, and you're going to use your pencil to create a little curved flicking motion to form that eyelash. Make sure that you're not drawing the lash as a straight line or it will look like a cartoon. The lashes on the outer corner are going to be longer, thicker and closer together, and as you get in towards the centre of the eye, the lashes are going to be a lot smaller and more spread apart. The lower lashes again are going to be flicking away from the tear duct, but they're going to be much smaller and much lighter and more spread apart again. This is something that normally takes a bit of practice, so I recommend having a spare page beside you that you could do some practices on before you add it to your main drawing. Okay, now we're ready to do the eyebrows, and to get them in the correct place, I'm going to do 2 guidelines going straight up from the tear ducts and 2 diagonal lines that lead upwards from the outer lashes. Within these guidelines, I can now start playing around with some eyebrow shapes. You can make them as thick or thin or arched or straight as you like. Obviously this is just learning for the first time and a practice go rather than trying to capture a specific person, so you can just experiment and draw the eyebrows in whatever shape you like. Make sure when you're doing this you're drawing really light, as this is just a guideline and we don't want this outline to be visible afterwards. Now I'm just going to gently erase those lines so they're barely visible. So now we're going to start drawing the individual hairs within the guidelines we've just created. I recommend doing a few practice goes of drawing the hairs on the side of your paper or on a spare page, and your pencil should be really sharp for drawing the hairs. So you want to create nice light thin lines for the hairs and just sort of use a flicking motion where you start by leaning on your page and then flick your pencil off the page to create that kind of hair shape. So the beginning of the eyebrow should have the hairs facing upwards, and as you get towards the middle part or the arch of the brow, the hair should be pointing more in a diagonal kind of direction, and then when you get to the outside or the tail of the brow, the hair should be going more horizontal, as you can see in the video. You'll notice after I draw in the individual hairs, I'll add a tiny bit of shading over the bottom of the brow. This is just to make the hair look more thick at the bottom and thinner at the top and create like a little bit more depth and contrast. I won't add any shading at the top of the hair because I want to keep this as individual pencil strokes to make it look more natural and thinner at the top. The bottom half of my face measures 9 centimeters. I'm going to mark just above the halfway point at 5 centimeters up from the bottom of the face, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line across here, which is where I'll place my nose. To begin my nose, I'm going to draw a circle right in the middle, which will form the tip of the nose, and this circle shouldn't go any wider than the inner corners of the eye. And I'm just going to very softly and gently sketch out the bridge of the nose from the eyebrows down to this circle. We do not want this as a harsh line. Draw this as light as possible. We're later going to smudge this out and soften it. I'm now going to draw a straight line right through the centre of that circle, and this is going to act as a guideline for how wide the nose will be. So the longer you make this line, the wider the nose will be. If the line is shorter, the overall shape of the nose will be smaller. I'm now going to draw 2 lines going down to the bottom of the circle to form this triangular shape, and then 2 lines going diagonally up towards the bridge of the nose. And these lines will be our guidelines for now drawing out the nose in detail. I'm going to go in with some dark curved lines at the bottom of this shape to form the nostrils. And then start drawing some curved lines around the sides of these diagonal lines to form the sides of the nose. Make sure these curved lines for the sides of the nose don't come around and join in directly to the nostrils. Instead, the lines should curve out and then back in slightly underneath where you drew the line for the nostrils, so they're about 1 millimeter or so below the nostril line. Once I'm happy with the shape of my nose, I'm going to go back in with the eraser and remove the straight guidelines that are going straight down through the nose and across the nose. I'm now going to add a tiny bit of shading to add some definition to the nose. I'm trying not to go too in depth with shading for this tutorial because I'm trying to keep it nice and simple, and shading is something that requires a little bit of practice and is a little bit tricky sometimes. But because the nose is the most three-dimensional thing on our face, we do need to add some light and shadow to make it look slightly more realistic. To add shading, I just gently skim my pencil on the page in very light, small circular motions. Don't lean heavy with your pencil when you're shading, instead just do it very gently and build up the tone and the darkness step by step. So you can see the areas I've added a little bit of shading to are the sides of the nose and just sort of around that circle that forms the tip of the nose. And now I'm going to take a Q-tip and just softly blend out that shading. I'm now going to go back in with a small eraser and just lift off some of the pencil marks right in the centre at the tip of the nose and a little bit at the sides of the nose to add in some light and just make it look a little bit more 3D again. I'll then finish it off with a little bit more definition from my pencil and then blend it out a little bit more with the Q-tip until I'm happy with it. I'm now going to mark out the guideline to draw my mouth. I have a 5cm gap between the nose and the bottom of the face, so I'm going to mark out 3.5 centimeters up from the bottom of my face, and where that mark is, I'll draw a light line straight across. I'm now drawing 2 very light guidelines down from the inner iris of each eye down to that mouth guideline to show where the outer corners of the mouth should be placed. Before we start the mouth, I just want to show you a common mistake I see when drawing lips, and this is giving the lips harsh lines and a really dark solid outline, and this is something we want to avoid as it can make them look quite cartoonish. Instead, we are going to draw the lips with really soft light lines, and we're going to build up the 3D definition with some shading and tone. So you can see I'm starting the lips by drawing the Cupid's bow, and I'm using the guideline that goes down through the middle of the face to keep the Cupid's bow central and symmetrical. I'm then going to draw some light, slightly curved lines that bring the Cupid's bow down to those outer corners of the mouth that we marked earlier. I'm now drawing a little curve below the Cupid's bow to form that sort of central part of the upper lip, and then drawing some light, slightly curved lines from that little curve in the middle out to the outer corners. To form the bottom lip, I'm just going to start in the centre with a slightly curved line, and I'm going to use some nice light lines to gently bring that up to the outer corners of the mouth. And I'll just erase that straight line in the middle before I begin shading. So the shading for the lips is actually going to be built up with lots of light little lines, and rather than drawing these lines straight, they should actually be at a curved angle to form the curved shape of the lip. Make sure that your pencil is nice and sharp so that the lines are small and subtle, and make sure that you're not leaning too heavy with your pencil. You want these to be really light. You should be aiming to keep the middle part of the lip the lightest and just building up those lines a little bit on the outer corners, the top and the bottom, to add a little bit more depth and shadow to those areas. Next, I'm going to add some darkness and definition between the upper and lower lip. And then I'll go back in and add some of that light circular style shading between the upper and lower lip and to the very bottom of the lower lip to add some more darkness and shadow. I'm going to start the upper lip with the same technique, building up lots of those little lines and making sure that they're nice and curved within the shape of the lip. And then I'm going to add a little extra gentle shading around the Cupid's bow and the outer corners of the lip. Again, you want to make sure that the centre part of the lip is the lightest. I'm now going to go in and blend out that shading a little bit with a Q-tip. Make sure not to overblend because you still want some of these lines to be visible. And finally, I'm going to add some highlights to the lips by taking a tiny eraser and just removing a little bit of the pencil right in the centre of the lips. And then I'll just go back in with my pencil once more and redefine anything that might have been erased accidentally. So now that the facial features are complete, I can look at the overall shape of the face and decide if I want to make any changes. As my girl has ended up with quite slender features, I'm just going to bring in the overall face shape a little bit more narrow than how I'd originally drawn it. You might decide that your face is going to be wider or more narrow than mine, or perhaps with a more squared jawline. I'm going to give my girl a neck so that she's not just a floating head. And to form the neck, you're going to draw guidelines from the outer corners of the eyes right down to the bottom of the face, and this will give you a rough estimate of where the neck should go. So I'm now going to sketch in the ears. Top of the ears will normally be level with the eyes, and the bottom of the ears will normally be level with the tip of the nose as a general guideline. This is just a nice easy method for drawing in the ears. I just make the curve of the ear a little bit wider at the top and then going in thinner at the bottom, and then just add in a tiny bit of shading towards the top and a little bit towards the bottom to add a bit of depth and definition. Okay, so my girl is now ready for some hair. This tutorial, I'm going to just sketch in the hair as an impression rather than doing the hair in fine detail, just because the hair is something that is quite difficult to do and would probably require a separate tutorial to teach how to do it properly. But I did want to show how everything falls into the correct proportion once the hair is added. Before you add the hair, it looks like the top of the head is much too spacious and the forehead is really big. But this space is to account for the hairline to be added within it, so you're not actually adding hair on top of the oval that you drew out for the space, but rather within it. So I've just played around drawing some lines just to form the overall shape of the hair to give the impression of what it should look like, and when I'm happy with that overall shape, then I'll just leave it like that for now. And that is the end of today's tutorial. I hope that you guys enjoyed it and that you do try it out at home. And just remember to take it step by step and enjoy it. I recommend pausing the videos wherever you need to, and you can re-watch any part as many times as you like.